Let us start with firewalls. So, what is a firewall? A firewall is a network security device. It is either hardware or software based, which monitors all incoming and outgoing traffic, and based on a defined set of security rules, it accepts, rejects, or drops that specific packet. A firewall establishes a barrier between secured internal networks and outside untrusted network such as internet. So it is basically placed between two different networks. Before firewalls, network security was performed by access control list, that is ACLs, residing on the routers. ACLs are rules that determine whether network access should be granted or denied to a specific IP address. So basically, the function of a firewall or ACL is to act as a checkpoint or a toll where or a security guard who basically checks and examines the incoming packets and decides whether to allow entry or not. But ACLs cannot determine the nature of the packet it is blocking. Also, ACL alone does not have the capacity to keep threats out of the network, hence the firewall was introduced. Connectivity to the internet is no longer optional for organizations. However, accessing the internet provides benefits to the organization. It also enables the outside world to interact with the internal network of the organization. This creates a threat to the organization. Now, in order to secure the internal network from unauthorized traffic, we need a firewall. So, these are the functions of firewall: accept a packet, reject a packet, or just drop the packet. You can see in the video, if it is a green packet, it is allowing the firewall, and a firewall eventually allows the packet to go inside the network. But if it is a malicious packet, it just rejects and drops the packet. Now, as we have discussed, there are two different types of firewalls. First one is a hardware firewall and the second one is a software firewall. Hardware firewalls are basically installed on the routers connecting the network and the internet, and software firewalls are basically programs installed on computers or laptops. The common examples of software firewalls are Quick Heal, Avast, and McAfee. So, before we see the firewall technologies, we should know how firewall works. So let us go back to the slide where we have seen the small video. Yes. The firewall matched the network traffic against a set of rules defined in its table. You can see the table there. Now, once the rule is matched, associate action is applied to the network traffic. For example, rules are defined as any employee for HR department cannot access the data from code server, and at the same time, another rule is defined like system administrator can access the data from both HR and technical department. Rules can be defined on the firewall based on the necessary and security policies of the organization. From the perspective of a server, network traffic can be either outgoing or incoming. Firewall maintains a distinct set of rules for both the cases. Mostly, the outgoing traffic originated from the server itself is allowed to pass. Still, setting a rule on outgoing traffic is always a good practice. Now, it is very difficult to explicitly cover every possible rule on the firewall, and for this reason, the firewall must always have a default policy. Now, default policy consists of the following actions: accept, reject, or drop. Suppose no rule is defined about SSH connection to the server on the firewall, it will follow the default policy. If default policy on the firewall is set to accept, then any computer outside of your office can still establish an SSH connection to the server. Therefore, setting up a default policy as a drop or reject is always a good practice. Now, the firewall technologies. First is Packet filtering firewall. Packet filtering firewall is used to control network access by monitoring outgoing and incoming packet and allowing them to pass or stop based on the source and destination IP addresses, protocols, and ports. It analyzes traffic at the network layer. Now, packet filter walls or firewalls treat each packet in isolation. They have no stability to tell whether a packet is a part of an existing system or a traffic. Only it can allow or deny the packets based on unique packet headers. Packet filtering firewall maintains a filtering table which decides whether the packet will be forwarded or discarded. Now, the second is circuit level gateway firewall. Circuit level gateways work at the session layer of the OSI model. It is the advanced version of application gateway. It acts as a virtual connection between the remote host and the internal users by creating a new connection between itself and remote host. It also changes the source IP address in the packet and puts its own IP address at the place of the source IP. This way, the IP addresses of the internal users are hidden and secured from the outside world. Next is application level firewall or application gateways. Now it is also known as a proxy server. It works in basically three steps. So the first step is user contacts the application gateway using a TCP application such as HTTP. Step 2, the application gateway asks about the remote host with which the user wants to establish a connection. It also asks for the user ID and a password that is required to access the service of the application gateway. And step 3, after verifying the authenticity of the user, the application gateway accesses the remote host on behalf of the user to deliver the packets. And as the name suggests, application level gateway or application layer firewall works at the application layer. And the last is stateful inspection firewall. It is also known as dynamic packet filters, and it keeps track of the state of the active connections and uses a combination of the previous firewalls. That is, it can be a combination of circuit gateway or an application gateway. So these are the firewall technologies. These are not the firewall types, but these are the firewall technologies. Now, what are the limitations of firewalls? Now, before doing that, if you want to listen or if you want to know more about different types of firewalls, there are two types of firewalls: hardware firewall and software firewalls. Those are the types of firewalls, and the technologies we have seen a couple of minutes ago. Now, what are the limitations of firewalls? A firewall does not prevent the network from new viruses, backdoor, and insider attacks. A firewall cannot do anything if the network design and configuration is faulty. A firewall is not an alternative to antivirus or anti-malware. A firewall cannot prevent social engineering threats. Also, a firewall does not prevent password misuse. A firewall does not block attacks from a higher level of protocol stack. Firewall does not protect against attacks from dial-in connections and attacks originating from common ports and applications. And again, firewall is unable to understand tunneled traffic. In the next lecture, we will see what is meant by DMZ or demilitarized zone.